And in the next 30 minutes now, we will take you through all the top stories from around the world on WION Speed News. Finally, breaking the suspense, US President Donald Trump has confirmed that the June 12th summit with Kim Jong-un is officially back on. This is a stunning turnaround which comes 8 days after the US President cancelled the meeting. Trump also raised the possibility of lifting sanctions on the North Korean regime, something his administration had previously suggested would only happen after full denuclearization. He also said that no new sanctions on North Korea will be imposed while the talks are ongoing. President Donald Trump departed for Camp David a short while after he said a nuclear arms summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will now go ahead as scheduled on June 12th in Singapore. After meeting with Kim Yong-chol, a close aide to the North Korean leader at the White House, Trump said, "I think it's probably going to be a very successful, ultimately a successful process." The Russian ambassador to the United Nations said there is a strong will by both the United States and North Korea to hold a summit on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia said the Council would address things as the situation develops. US President Donald Trump met with the top aide to Kim Jong-un Friday afternoon in the Oval Office and ended weeks of uncertainty, announcing the historic summit with Kim Jong-un and that it is back on for June 12th in Singapore. The two Koreas agreed at a high-level meeting to hold talks this month on military issues and reunions of families divided by the 1950 to 1953 Korean War. The meeting in the border village of Panmunjom in the demilitarized zone that separates North and South Korea is the latest in a flurry of diplomatic activity intended to sustain a thaw in relations with the isolated North. China urged all countries, especially major economies, to stand firmly against protectionism and maintain the normal international trade order. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying made the remarks when asked about the US decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminium exports from the European Union, Canada and Mexico. Tens of thousands of Argentines from the interior of the country to Buenos Aires Plaza de Mayo to demand more jobs and greater social benefit. Backed by the country's largest workers' union, the so-called Federal March is calling on President Mauricio Macri to allocate increased funds for food and health needs, addiction, recovery, social infrastructure and family farming. Heavy rain turned shops and streets of Belgium's historic city of Liège into rivers. Videos uploaded to social media showed water cascading down a staircase in a flooded shop and water drains bouncing up and down and overflowing with water caused by the heavy rain. Storm conditions have caused traffic chaos across the country in the past week, advising travelers to opt for the train instead of cars. In a massive reconstruction effort partly timed with this summer's 2018 finals of FIFA World Cup to take place in Russia, Moscow's Sheremetyevo Airport has completed construction of its new Terminal B in the northern part of the country's busiest airport. Base carrier Aeroflot has started transferring its domestic flights to the new terminal, a process which is expected to stretch beyond June. Police confronted Chilean students in Valparaiso protesting against sexism in education and violence against women. Banners call for the introduction of non-sexist education and the end of sexual violence following a number of cases of abuse against women and deep-rooted practices in universities and schools. The first protests began a month ago in Austral University, where a professor was accused of sexual harassment. US President Donald Trump said he might prefer to end the North American Free Trade Agreement, which the United States is renegotiating with Canada and Mexico in favor of two bilateral agreements with its neighbors. Earlier, President Donald Trump warned Canada that any renegotiation NAFTA deal must be a fair deal or there will be no deal at all. Two lions, two tigers and a jaguar thought to have escaped from a German were found to have never left their enclosures after all. One bear did escape its enclosure but remained on the zoo premises. Local authorities said the animal had to be shot dead after posing a threat to people in the vicinity. Flooding caused by storms damaged parts of the zoo that were adjacent to the river bank, causing damage to the gates and fences of the enclosures. Hundreds of protesters in Amman, Jordan, converged on the Prime Minister's office on chanting anti-government slogans and calling on the government to resign as they rallied against the latest wave of price hikes. Jordan put an imminent increase in gasoline prices on hold on Friday after public anger about tax hikes recommended by the IMF spilled into the streets this week. Italian President Sergio Mattarella swore in Italy's new government in a ceremony that ended 3 months of political deadlock. Newly appointed Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, a little-known law professor, will lead a cabinet that includes two coalition party heads. The coalition's manifesto says it will push the European Union to review the bloc's rules that limit public spending, which Salvini says have enslaved Italians. Protests after teenagers' murder case continued in Georgia despite the chief prosecutor Irakli Shodzadeh's resignation. A large part of demonstrators demanded resignation of the entire government. Two teenagers, David and Levin, both aged 16, were killed in a brawl between students from two different schools. The United States vetoed a Kuwait-drafted UN Security Council resolution that condemned Israel's use of force against Palestinian civilians, criticizing it as a grossly one-sided view. Out of the Council's 15 members, 10 voted in favor, including France, and only the United States voted against. There were 4 abstentions, including Britain. Israeli forces killed a Palestinian nurse on Friday as she tried to help a wounded protester at the Gaza border, while Israel said militants had attacked its troops with gunfire and a grenade. Witnesses say that the 21-year-old volunteer medic was shot as she ran toward the fortified border east of the South Gaza city of Khan Yunis. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates signed a declaration on a strategic partnership which included an agreement to continue cooperation in the oil and gas sphere. The declaration said this cooperation is aimed at providing balance and stability on the global oil market. Denmark is the latest European country to ban the face veil in public. It can now earn you a hefty fine. Denmark passed the law to quote-unquote uphold Danish values. The law was passed by 75 votes to 30 in Parliament and will come into force on the 1st of August. More than 680 people have received Ebola vaccinations in the 3 health zones where dozens of cases of the deadly virus have been confirmed. Health experts are pushing to find contacts of those infected after having already located more than 1,000 cases. Nearly 500 people have been vaccinated in Mbandaka and more than 110 have been vaccinated in rural Bikoro. 8 children were injured during a chemistry show in a trade center of the Siberian city of Irkutsk. According to the Russian TASS news agency, children aged 7 to 10 years received burns of various degrees of severity because of a failure during an experiment which demonstrated the functioning of fireworks. Russian investigative committee said it has started criminal investigation on charges of safety neglect. Spain's King Felipe was informed of the appointment of Pedro Sanchez as new Prime Minister after the ousting of Mariano Rajoy in a no-confidence vote triggered by a corruption scandal involving members of his centre-right People's Party. Following protocol, Parliament Speaker Ana Pastor formally informed the King, who subsequently signed the decree at Zarzuela Palace, appointing Sanchez as Spain's new leader. Russian President Vladimir Putin told Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed that efforts by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries have been good for oil prices. Later, Putin and bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates signed a declaration on a strategic partnership, which included an agreement to continue cooperation in the oil and gas sphere. Apple has approved an updated version of the Telegram messaging service a day after Telegram complained that it had been prevented from getting software improvements into the hands of iPhone owners worldwide. Telegram Chief Executive Pavel Durov announced the turnabout on Twitter, thanking Apple and CEO Tim Cook for getting the latest Telegram version to millions of users despite the recent setbacks. Anton Shkaplerov of the Russian space agency Roscosmos handed over command and the key to the International Space Station to NASA's Andrew J. Fustel ahead of returning to Earth. Shkaplerov and 3 other crew members aboard the ISS are scheduled to return to Earth on June 3rd. Another trio will launch to the ISS thereafter. Visa customers were caught by surprise when they were unable to pay with their Visa cards when shopping. Payments firm Visa said that on Friday it was experiencing a service disruption, preventing some transactions in Europe being processed. Time magazine took to the sky with nearly 1,000 drones to create its iconic red-bordered cover hundreds of feet over Folsom, California. Time teamed up with Intel to create the airborne cover using 958 of Intel's shooting star drones that can be programmed to create images with their lights. The team flew the drones at upwards of 400 feet, battling changing winds and turbulence to coordinate the flying lights into the magazine's image. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for equal access at sea and in the air for all Asian countries at a major defence conference, but avoided singling out China's claims to the hotly contested South China Sea. Modi outlined his regional vision at the annual Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore, attended by defence chiefs from over 40 countries, including US Defence Secretary Jim Mattis. Thane Police has issued summons to Bollywood actor and filmmaker Arbaz Khan for recording his statement on Saturday in connection with an alleged IPL betting racket. In a letter sent to Arbaz on Friday, the police asked him to join the probe in the wake of arrest of an alleged bookie who was placing bets on the recently concluded Indian Premier League. The racket was busted on May 15 by the anti-extortion cell of Thane Police's crime branch, with the arrest of 4 people in Mumbai. Condemning the reduction of fuel prices by just 1 paise per litre after 16 days of relentless price hike, the Mumbai Congress said it would launch a social media campaign to express its anguish. As a part of the online campaign titled, quote-unquote, Tweet Morsha, the opposition would mobilize people to post tweets to PM Narendra Modi and CM Devendra Fadnavis over the issue and suggest ways to reduce the fuel prices. Tibetans in exile held a football tournament in North Indian hill town of Dharamshala to express their gratitude towards the Indian community. The 10-day-long Thank You India Tibetan Football Tournament was organized by the Tibetan Youth Congress at the Tibetan Children's Village School in the city, where 16 teams hailing from different parts of the country participate. Embattled liquor tycoon Vijay Mallya has resigned as director of his Formula One motorsport company Force India, as his legal team filed an application to seek an appeal against a £1 billion UK High Court ruling on freezing of his assets. The 62-year-old Mallya, who is fighting extradition to India on fraud and money laundering charges worth an estimated 9,000 crore Indian rupees, resigned as director of Sahara Force India Formula One Team Limited on May 24th. The EU delegation to India organized a conference on plastic pollution and management in New Delhi. The conference, marking the World Environment on June 5th, was hosted by the EU delegation and missions of European Union member states with the support of the Union Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change.